Welcome back, everybody, to our Midwestern Dynasty, where we have another offseason upon us. We just went 13-2 this past season, winning our first ever conference championship and our first ever playoff game. It may have taken overtime for us to beat USC in the quarterfinals, but we got the job done. After that, though, we lost in the semifinals to Clemson in what was another great game, and they would go on to win the national championship, so you can't really feel too bad about that loss. We finished in the final rankings number 4 behind USC, even though we just beat them head-to-head. The only explanation I could come up with as to why we finished behind him in the rankings is that Kirk Herbstreit must have been the one doing the final rankings. Vinny Moore, our offensive coordinator from the past 2 seasons and the Broyles Award winner from this past season, he is going to be leaving us to become the UConn head coach, so good luck to him there. But that does mean we have to hire a new offensive coordinator, and we already have. It is going to be Mitch Falk, who you may remember was the head coach of Georgia Southern, one of our rivals. It did not go well for him there as the head man. He went 4-32, a pretty awful record, the worst in all of college football over that time span. But we bring him in because he has the top part of Motivator maxed out, which will give us a boost in off-season training, and he also has a lot of points put into Tactician, which will give us some more ratings boost, not permanent, but still some more boosted ratings for us. Alex Whitworth, our defensive coordinator, is going to be back for his 4th year with the team, and I'm expecting it to be the final year that we have him because he is very likely going to be getting a head coaching job next offseason. On to players leaving, we have one player that is going to be graduating. That would be Gabe Newcomb, who was never a full-time player for us or even really a big-time role player for us, but he did have one of the better interceptions that I've ever seen in Midwestern history. So we have to replace him. And we also may have to replace Dwayne Willett, the Plainfield, Illinois native. The left-handed quarterback wants to leave due to playing style. But I want to keep him around for at least one more year to see what his ratings look like after an offseason of training, especially considering we just hired an offensive coordinator that will boost our offseason training. So we are going to try and persuade him to stay, and luckily, he is going to be back for at least one more year with us. When it comes to the transfer portal and off-season recruiting, we don't have that much we could do because we only had one player leave us in the off-season, and we already have 15 commits. So if we brought in nobody else in this recruiting class, we would still have to tell 14 players on the current roster to transfer away before the start of this next season. I still want to add a couple more players in this recruiting class, but we're not going to go crazy. We're not going to go above 20. We'll just jump straight to National Signing Day and go over what ended up happening. Samuel Crawford, he was one of the better players available in the transfer portal. He had it narrowed down to us, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State. We had the lead heading into National Signing Day, but he ends up flipping at the last second and choosing Oklahoma over us. So he'll head there for his senior season, and we end up only getting 19 commits in this recruiting class. Jesse Ham is a quarterback who has elite development, a big arm, accuracy to all 3 levels of the field, decent mobility, and good size. So he's got everything you're looking for in a quarterback. We'll see if he's able to push right away as a true freshman for that starting quarterback spot. Blaine Sheehy and Cesar Paredes are 2 running backs that are very similar. Both are right around 6 foot 230, have good speed for their size, and I think could eventually develop into something if we give them some time. I doubt both of them end up having a role right away as true freshmen, considering the backs we already have on the roster. Edward Chamberlain is another running back that we are going to be bringing in. He is a pass-catching back, though, who has some decent route running in hands. See if he can develop into something. Jaden Berry and Jalen Hyde are 2 wide receivers that are really similar. Berry is 6'3", 207. Hyde is 6'4", 208. And Hyde actually has the better development trait, despite being not a 4-star. He's only a 3-star. So that is good news for him. We'll see if that ends up leading to him having better skill caps and a brighter future. Dylan Washington, he is going to be transferring to us from Liberty, so we get him from a conference foe. He has star development, and you're going to see later, he had a really good season at Liberty. So we're going to be getting a really established player. Marco Mines, athlete who is going to be a tight end, has star development, and I think he could be the future starter at tight end that we have been looking for, because we don't really have much after Paul Schuler and, of course, Joey Hammer. Those 2 are going to be seniors this next year. Matt Davis, he should be a really good player, elite development, exactly what you're hoping for. and a left tackle who is the best player out of his state, being Minnesota. Tyrone Lowe is also from Minnesota, only has impact as his development trait. Maybe he could develop into a solid starter down the line. Terrell Cummins only has impact as his development trait, despite being a 4-star gem. I was expecting more out of his dev trait. At least his ratings are pretty good, and hopefully the skill caps are also good with him. Alan Hartley, we end up getting him. Impact development, good power blocking center, who doesn't have the best mobility, but at least he can hold strong at center against some of the bigger defensive tackles in college football. Davion Career only has normal development, despite being a 4-star. At least his ratings are good, but I'm sure that the normal dev is going to hold him back somewhat. Glenn Bredesen has star development. Don't know what the pass rushing skills look like yet. At least the block shedding's great, and he's a pretty good athlete for a player of his size. Kobe Curtin, I think he'll have a really bright future. Reminds you a lot of Ethan Dugan when we were recruiting him out of high school. We'll see if he can live up to that comparison. Sam Landman only has normal development as well as a 4-star. Bit disappointing for the Chicago, Illinois native. At least his speed and athleticism are there. He has to work on the zone though. Alex Blades, elite development. He might be the surprise of the entire recruiting class. A 3-star gem who should have a very bright future. Christian Coxey has star development, safety that we are going to be bringing in. And he's got great zone, good speed. Excited to see what he could develop into. And the other safety that we brought in, Malik Tiffin, only has impact development. Not quite as good as Coxey, but he should at least be able to develop into something, at least maybe a backup for us. We end up finishing with the 27th best recruiting class. That's really good considering we only had 19 total commits, 7 4-stars and 12 3-stars. Yes, we did finish with the best recruiting class in our own conference again. Speaking of our own conference, it's time to talk about possibly switching which conference we play in. I want to hear your thoughts down below on which of these ideas you like best, and then whatever you guys like best we will do next offseason. We could just go independent. That would allow us to select all of our regular season games on our schedule, but the downside would be that we would not have a conference championship game to play in. The American Athletic Conference would be a step up in competition from the CUSA. We would give them a market they don't have, the Chicago area market. Memphis and Tulsa are both relatively close, both under 655 miles away from Plainfield, Illinois. Not a bad option. The Big 12 would be a bigger step up in competition. Again, we would give them the Chicago area market, a market that they just don't have. Cincinnati, Iowa State, Kansas, West Virginia, and Kansas State are all within 600 miles from Plainfield, Illinois. The downside with the Big 12 is that they already have 16 teams, so it would be a pretty big conference. We don't necessarily have to do any of those. We could just stay in the CUSA. That is also an option. But let me know in the comment section which of those options you like best. Well, we are now at my least favorite part of the offseason. We're at the part where we have to encourage some players to transfer away. Unfortunately, we have to tell 18 players to go play somewhere else next year. So this is going to be a really long list, and we'll go over it in a second. But the reason that we got to this point is that at the start of this series, we had no underclassmen on the team. We had only juniors and seniors at the start of this series, and we had a huge gap because of that in terms of classes on the team. So we only had one senior that graduated this past year, and Gabe Newcomb, who was a JUCO player when we brought him in. So this shouldn't end up happening again, hopefully. But let's go over the list. Punter Craig Kaser, kicker CJ Klein, safety Mike Ezeki, quarterbacks Juan Leverett and Emilio Alcantara, linebacker Marvin Johnson, edge rusher Vaya Asiasi, defensive tackle Emmanuel Blunt, offensive tackle Zaire Agude, guards Darrell Lamar, Rashad Gilreath, center James Maldonado, tight end Jamie McCrane, wide receivers Xavier Speed and Keyshawn Edmonds, running back Cameron Hellestray, quarterbacks Jordan Jones and Forrest Fry. Juan Leverett, a bit of a surprise because, yeah, he was a starter for us at one point. James Maldonado was a really good player. So is Rashad Gilreath. And also the two quarterbacks are very surprising probably. But I figured Jordan Jones and Forrest Fry, two players that were getting up there in terms of where they're at in their years, should probably have a chance to go somewhere else and have a chance to start somewhere else. They were not going to be starters for us here with us bringing in Jesse Ham, keeping Dwayne Willett, and already having a of course, Chuck Fleck on the roster. We had to make some tough decisions, and those were the decisions we ended up making in the end. I hope that they're all able to find a new team to play for next year and beyond, but it's time to move on and talk about this team and what we have on the roster for year 5 after training and position changes. We'll go position group by position group, starting with the quarterbacks. Chuck Fleck is all of a sudden the most experienced quarterback we have in the room in terms of playing time, and he will have a chance to retain his starting job. He had a tough finish to his freshman season, throwing 3 picks in that playoff game that ultimately did do us in and cost us a chance to play for a national championship. If he does continue to struggle, if he struggles early in the season, Jesse Ham would take over. He just looked too good in practice. His skill caps are really good, and I do think he has the better ceiling than Chuck Fleck, but I want to give Fleck a chance to keep his starting job. So for now, Ham is going to be redshirted, Fleck will be the starter, and the backups will be Dwayne Willett and Willie Scales. If Fleck has to miss a play or two, then Willett or Scales will step in, but if it's a long-term injury, then Ham would step in, or if Fleck struggles, then Ham's going to step in. At wide receiver, Nick Shields, he is your true number 1 wide receiver. His ratings didn't really change that much. He was already very good for us last year, though. One of the best route runners in all of college football, especially deep down the field. But who's going to be number 2 on this team? Dylan Washington had 11 receiving touchdowns last year for Liberty. Also had 6 rushing touchdowns. Don't think he's going to be doing that for us with our running back room, but he is going to have the first chance to be the number 2 wide receiver on this team, and he will likely play a lot in the slot because his underneath route running is the best thing he has. George Barr had the biggest offseason of any wide receiver on our team. He had an incredible offseason. He's up to an 88 overall, and he is a senior, and he is going to play quite a bit. He had a huge catch for us to give us the lead in the semifinal game against Clemson, and I guess he just carried that momentum into the offseason, so he will get a lot of playing time, and he might end up taking over as the number 2 wide receiver as the year progresses. Devin Gentry, I know he's got that elite development, but he will be wide receiver 4. Can't forget about Titus Dingle, Roberto Suarez, Sam Genius, the 2 freshmen we just brought in. All of a sudden, this wide receiver room looks really deep. At tight end, Marco Mines. This guy was really nasty out there, putting on juke moves on starters on our defense, and he is going to be really good down the line. He might even be good for us now if we had to play him, but we don't have to play him. We're going to redshirt him because we do have 2 tight ends that are both seniors that I trust in Joey Hammer and Paul Schuler, plus a couple of other tight ends that are solid depth. So the tight end room is another group that looks pretty good all of a sudden. I don't exactly know what's going to happen at running back for us this year. Avery Sizer, he has established himself as one of the better running backs in all of college football. It is his senior season, so he deserves the ball a ton and deserves a chance to finish off his college career the right way. Darrell F., he is a redshirt junior and is a high enough overall that this could be his final year playing for us. He could end up declaring and going to the NFL early, so he also should be getting the ball a ton. But you can't forget about Von Clifton, who sat on the bench for most of last year, barely got any playing time because he was redshirted. He's up to an 80 overall and looks like he's really good. So we'll have to figure out a way to get all 3 of these guys the ball enough, plus our receivers and our tight ends. You can't forget about them. It's a good problem to have, sure, but a tough problem to have when you have so many good players that you don't know exactly who's going to end up getting the ball enough and who won't. The offensive line is a position group that we set out to make the strength of the team when we first started this dynasty, even before we got into any games. That was something that we wanted to make happen. We wanted this offensive line to eventually become the strength of the team. At this point, there's no denying it. The offensive line is definitely one of the strengths of the team. You got Jimmy Fisher at left tackle back for his senior season. You have Addison Bynum, who's a redshirt junior at left guard. Those 2 are going to be rock solid. Not worried at all about those 2. At center, Winston Smith looks like he's going to be even better than he was last year. He was good for us last year. Garrett, pretty much maxed out, but he's good enough as he is. Titus Hardman, he might be the weak link in terms of pass blocking. The run blocking's great. I think the offensive line is going to be fantastic for us this season. It was good for us last year, but it should be elite this year. Matt Davis. He's not going to end up starting for us right away. We're going to try and redshirt him. I know he came here to play right away, but I'm hoping he's okay with sitting 1 year and then taking over at left tackle as a redshirt freshman and starting the rest of his college career there. He's going to be a great player. Looked like he was already pretty good in practice. He's an 80 overall, so his ratings are kind of there, but he has a lot of room to improve. So for now, he will be redshirted. We do have a lot of good depth on the offensive line across the board, so I'm not too concerned about any possible injuries on the offensive line. Speaking of injuries, we should probably mention this, or I should mention this, and that is that I have increased the injury slider a little bit to make our depth matter a bit more, or possibly our lack of depth at certain positions. On the defensive side of the ball now, Edward Reed, he is going to be a problem for opposing offenses once again. It's his senior season. He's a great run stopper. The pass rushing skills, kind of there, kind of not. When we do need another pass rusher on the interior defensive line, look for us to sub in Paul Dahl, who got a lot better this offseason. He was already a good pass rusher last year for us, but this year, I think he's ready to take the next step. He has maxed out his power moves, and his finesse moves are not that far behind, and even the run stopping ability is kind of there for him. LaMichael Edmonds is an athletic freak. I was hoping for a bit more in terms of his ratings going up, but the athleticism, you cannot deny that. He's got 84 speed as a big interior defensive lineman. He's going to play some. Andre Okoye and Cortland Rahman, they will also mix in. So the interior defensive line is another position group we're pretty deep at. At defensive end, Eric Wham and Santiago Martino are both back and will be our starters once again. Wham, he's a senior. He's put together a great career, but how is he going to cap off his career? Can he have a monster season and put together his best year yet, or will he play second fiddle again to Santiago Martino, who just won the Defensive Player of the Year award? Whether I believe he should have or not, he did win it because he had a statistically good season, and I believe these two should be able to form a dynamic duo and get after the quarterback in a very efficient way. But we cannot forget about our backups we have at defensive end. Kevin Campanaro and Jimmy French are both very capable players with good overalls that deserve at least some playing time. We can't just hold them on the bench forever. At off-ball linebacker, this is a group that is comparable to running back, where I just don't know what to do. Thomas Mintz and Ethan Dugan both complement each other in what they do well and what they do not quite as well, but still pretty well. They're both good players at just about everything. But we also have other players that deserve playing time at linebacker. Taylor Sanzenbacher is all of a sudden the highest overall linebacker we have on the team, and he's a senior. He has worked his butt off to get up there in overall, and he should play quite a bit. So maybe we just run more 4-3 to get all three of those guys on the field. There's also Deon Gage, who has the best block shedding of any linebacker on the team. He has 87 block shedding, and that is not the only thing he's good at. He's also pretty good in coverage, has good athleticism, so he's somebody that you just can't ignore. You can't just sit him on the bench. Gonna have to have him rotate in. Enrique Roundtree is a senior, so you'd think that he should get a lot of playing time, but I just can't really justify it when he's not as good as these other linebackers are in coverage. Ahmad North and Tyreek Warrior are two other players that probably should play a lot, but just won't be able to because there are too many other good linebackers on our team at the moment. Ben Edmonds, he is the only cornerback on the team that has an interception in their career. He has been cornerback one for pretty much his entire time here at Midwestern, and the plan is to have him be CB1 once again. DeMarco Cooney played a lot in the slot last year, got better in the offseason. He's the highest overall cornerback we have, but I don't think he's going to be playing in the slot as much as he did last year, mostly because we have two other better options for the slot. In Gordon Sheed, who had a massive offseason, got a lot better, and there's also Shaquem Short, who is even a higher overall than Gordon Sheed, but Sheed, he looked better in practice. They're both way better in man than they are in zone. They're not terrible in zone, but they're not as good as they are in man coverage. So maybe we run more man coverage this year. If we do, and Ben Edmonds, he is kind of going to be, not as good as he should be because he's better in zone than he is in man. So we have a dilemma at cornerback on what type of coverage we want to run. Maybe we just mix and match and kind of do a little bit of everything. Alex Blades, he has a very bright future, as you saw with his skill caps and his dev trait. Excited to see what he ends up developing into. Sean Stacy and Keontae Speed are two depth cornerbacks that will also rotate in. Can't forget about those two. Onto the safety room, where the leader of that group is the reigning Defensive Back of the Year award winner, who has been a team captain since he came onto campus as a true freshman. He's now a senior. That would be Josh Wood. I have high expectations for him. I'm hoping he has an even better year this year than he did last year. The other safety that starts opposite of him is Deontay Bland, who has 99 zone coverage, has 81 catching, and is pretty good at everything else as well. Those two will be the main two safeties that we utilize, but we run some 4-2-5, might not run as much as we have in the past because our cornerback room is getting better and our linebacker room also is getting better. So maybe not as much 4-2-5, but when we do, George Scales and George Noddy are going to be rotating as that third safety. They will also rotate in to give Josh Wood and Deontay Bland some breaks out there. Caleb Packer, he's coming along nicely, has star development, hoping he gets even better next offseason. And Anthony Rhodes, he'll be kind of just a extra depth guy, maybe some special teams play for him this year. As for our two kicking specialists, I thought that Jason Ops would get better, but he didn't. The kick power, that's the exact same, and the kick accuracy may also be the same. So that sucks. I thought he would have a good offseason and become a better kicker, but he didn't. Seth Hearns, he's the exact same player that he has been since the start of his time here at Midwestern. He has already reached his skill cap ceiling for his kick power and his kick accuracy. When it comes to the redshirt list, here it is. We are going to be redshirting every single true freshman that we just brought in. They can play in up to 4 games, and I'm sure a lot of them will play in 4 games because we do have a lot of good true freshmen on the team, but it's best for them and for us that we redshirt them. Now, the new recruiting class that we're going to talk about and future recruiting classes, we are going to be focusing more on Illinois prospects and Midwest prospects. We have been recruiting a little bit too far away, in my opinion, from where we should be in this series. So from now on, we'll focus more on Illinois and more on Midwest prospects. We are targeting the number 1, number 2, number 4, number 9, and number 12 prospects from the state of Illinois. And there are some great looking players. Jamie Quinton, that tight end, is a 6'5" player who can block really well, it looks like. Don't know the pass catching skills. And then you got Andre Ohalete, who is an athletic quarterback who should be able to develop into a starter down the line. Earl Helm, I know we got a lot of competition for him, but that elite speed at running back is just something you can't ignore. You have an athletic looking center and Jason Lilia, who should develop into a starter down the line. And Jason Burton, a wide receiver with good speed and route running. So a lot of good players that we are targeting from the state of Illinois, but we're also targeting some other 4-star prospects that are not from the state of Illinois. Roderick Duggar, he's from Oklahoma, and Alfonso Fuchsia from Missouri, a safety who looks like he has some pretty solid ratings. We will begin the year ranked inside the top 25, so the expectations for us this year are sky high, as they should be. The roster is pretty much the same as it was last year when we made a run to the college football playoffs and even won a game in the playoffs. Here's a look at our schedule for the upcoming year. Our non-conference games are going to be more difficult this year, I believe, than they were last year. We start things right away with a ranked game against West Virginia, who could be in the same conference as us in the future if we end up joining the Big 12. So let me know down below what conference you want to see us playing next year and what your expectations are for the upcoming season. We'll take on West Virginia and their wide receiver Cameron Lacoste, who just went off for over 200 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns in their first game. We'll see if we can slow him down and beat West Virginia and get this brand new season off to a good start. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.